like this. Hi, I'm Scott Howard with Earthen Natural Building, and welcome to the first chapter of EarthenPaints, do-it-yourself. So let's get right into it. First you're going to need to collect certain materials. Here we have a finely ground silica sand. See what it looks like. It's a very fine powder. We have a white powdered kaolin clay. This is also a very fine white powder. We have some granular borax, and this is a 10 molar borax. And some common white flour. And of course the sodium silicate. A variety of pigments, which we'll mix in at the end. Right, so what do all these different things do? Well, when we're going to make this paint, we're going to mix about 1/3 part fine silica sand with 1/3 part powdered kaolin clay with 1/3 part wheat paste. Take the flour with water, cook it down into a wheat paste, just like a glue. Activate the glutens. We're going to mix that with this sand and this clay, and we're going to add, in smaller quantities, a little bit of borax with a small amount of the sodium silicate. Okay. The sand acts as a body in the paint. The clay is a binder. It's a sticky element. The wheat paste is obviously a binder. The borax is more of a preservative. It actually acts as a binder as well. The borax is really needed whenever we add wheat paste into any of our earthen mixtures. And then finally, the sodium silicate is actually a deflocculant. It keeps things in suspension, and it also is a binder. It's also known as water glass. Some kind of a mixing tool. This is going to really speed things up for us. You can mix it by hand. I think this size mixing tool is probably the best for small batches of paint. This is a kitchen wand handheld blender by Braun. So we want to keep the powdery silica materials and clays out of our lungs using the respirator. Whenever we work with this stuff and powder gets in the air, you want to be wearing this respirator. You need a few cups on hand, different containers. They have to be clean. You're going to be measuring things, and a variety of containers is really useful when making colors, for example. A brush, some trowels. Now this is a yogurt lid with the edge cut off. This is one of the best trowels you can get. Both the Japanese trowel, which is a very fine, flexible trowel, and collect your materials and come on down for chapter 2. Welcome to part 2 of the EarthenPaints do-it-yourself class. And we're just letting our wheat paste cool down a little bit still, and we're going to start mixing together our sand and our clay with some water. Okay, so first we're going to make some wheat paste here. I have my all-purpose flour, I got my pot, hot plate. Okay, so we have measured out 2 parts water and 1 part flour. I am currently heating half of the water, and I have half of the water here that's unheated. So what I'm going to do is put this flour right here in the cool water and mix it in. And once it's fully mixed in and there are no lumps, then I will proceed to mix that concoction in with the warm water. So I'm just going to let that cool for a little while. You see the steam rising off of it. I'm going to be putting this respirator on and mixing together a measured amount of the sand and the clay using my handy mixing wand. And I'm going to start out with a very small amount of water in the bottom of the bucket. The proportions of this amount of water to these amounts of sand and clay would be approximately 1/2. So you have 1/2 part water to 1 part sand to 1 part clay. Momentarily we'll add 1 part wheat paste and finish it off with a little bit more borax and sodium silicate, perhaps some pigments. So for right now, watch carefully as I mix together the water, the sand, and the clay. It's getting a little bit thick, so I can add a little bit more water. Like maybe that much. A little more. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be 1/2 cup borax would be enough for a 5-gallon bucket of paint. Now that's a lot of paint. So the amount of borax we need when it's 10 molar, because of the concentration, isn't all that much. So for this amount of paint, I'm going to add maybe 2 tablespoons, let's say. Like that much. Alright. I'm going to add a little more water because I know I'm going to add a tiny bit more wheat paste. So, the wheat paste. Just got to put the rest of the wheat paste in here. Oh, look at that. Solid. Alright, oh, we'll probably need a little more water with that wheat paste. And the sodium silicate, if you remember that, water glass, this stuff is like a gel, okay? And it's a deflocculant. A very, very tiny amount of this stuff goes a long, long way. 3 to 4 tablespoons sodium silicate per 5-gallon bucket of paint. So I just added a couple of drops here to this tiny sample. You need a tiny bit more water because sometimes as the clay absorbs the water in your mix will get thicker, so you have to add a little more water as you work with it. At some point you won't need to add any more, but tiny amounts of water at a time. Not too liquidy. You're going for somewhere between the consistency of yogurt and that of cream. depending on the application. So there you have it. That was the first mixture of base earthen paint. This is going to be white because all of our ingredients are white. And in the next chapter we'll learn how to mix together earthen pigments, oxide pigments, to add to our paint and get a wide variety of colors. So right here are some of the potential colors that we can get using the basic oxides: red iron oxide, yellow iron oxide, and black iron oxide. Earthen paint is generally considered to be an indoor paint. So we're going to paint this during this class, and this is actually an earthen plaster. Sometimes you might call it a cob plaster, and it just has sand and clay and very fine straw mixed together to make this sculptural surface. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the application of this paint before we even use any colors. So like I said, I can use a brush. Just like this. You get some interesting effects there with the sculpture that I have going. Or I can use my hands. So this is the most traditional method. It's quite easy, totally non-toxic, and very fun to do. I mentioned also that we have different types of trowels. So we have this trowel and this trowel. I suggest starting out with this trowel. Again, just a yogurt lid with the rim cut off. You get a very nice application of the earthen paint with that. Extremely smooth textures are possible. It's a light touch. And then of course, the Japanese trowel. Which again, a whole nother element. Very smooth. So that's it for our basic tools, and we're going to mix some colors in the next chapter. Okay, so let's talk about colors now. There's three main oxides. You got your black iron oxide. Here's your red iron oxide. Okay. And here's the yellow iron oxide. So I always teach people to use these three colors first, because you can make a lot of colors using just these three colors. So what I'm going to do is mix up the powder with a tiny bit of water. We always mix the powder with a little bit of water so that it will mix in well with the paint. And once I have each of these colors mixed separately, I'm going to mix each of them with each other so you can see what that creates. Here we go. Just like this. Okay, so there we have it. I brought some yellow iron oxide, I've got some red iron oxide, and I've got some black iron oxide. I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of water to each of these. And then swish it around. So all three of those are mixed. Now, the color when it dries will be lighter than this. So this yellow that you see here actually turns out like this. Anyway, so when we mix these together and combine them, we get some interesting results. Red and black, of course, makes purple. That you can see here, dark purple. And then black by itself, interestingly enough, when it dries, it's kind of blue. So when you mix black with yellow, it creates green. Very earthen green. And that looks like this. So, just like this. I have my base paint. I'd like to put some pigment into it. How much pigment can I put into my paint? So again, back to the 5-gallon bucket proportions. You can actually put up to 1,000 grams of powdered pigment into a 5-gallon bucket of earthen paint. I would, for example, add to this tiny bit of earthen paint, I'm going to add some yellow. Just a drop. And I'd like to add some red. I really like orange, so. Check out my hue. And get like a little more yellow in there. Come over this with another coat or maybe 2 coats of plaster or maybe an earthen paint to make it very smooth and give it color and texture. It's going to be gorgeous.